Howdy everybody, we're back with some RPG horror stories. Let's just jump right into it. Our first story is from user Frank the Six Rabbit, and it is titled, Am I the Asshole for Doing the Drop Cast Pickup Cycle for My Cleric? Really short story that left me feeling like an asshole. 5e D&D. I joined a game with a nice group of people, 2 trying to learn the game and 2 being older players. The DM's played since 3.5 and was very welcoming. DM says he's hand-waving some tedious rules in the game, so don't worry about things like ammo or light versus heavily obscured. Mentions dropping prone for a free action and grabbing items as an object interaction. Rules talk goes for about 30 minutes and the new players are excited. Cool. Skipping the boring stuff, we get to the first session at level 1 and start the game rolling stealth in the woods. We get caught after the ranger missed an attack on some bandit and combat begins. So to start us off here, so I often personally hand wave some of the potentially tedious rules in 5e. So normally I don't count things like ammo. I either just have the PC buy a quiver or bolt case, unless it's some sort of fancy ammo, like it's a +1 or +2 ammo or a dragon slaying arrow or something like that, or some other type of rare ammo, like for example, bullets, if guns really are very rare in your setting. In the case of guns where I've had them, they will usually at some point get access to a magic item that will have like a bag of endless bullets, so that way we can kind of yada yada away the need for like a quiver, because initially once they have it, it's kind of fun for the character to kind of be making bullets and stuff like that. It's fun to get the materials together and get to do that, but after a while it gets a little tedious, so then I just make sure it's like, oh yeah, hey, there's a magic item where there's just a bag full of bullets and a horn of gunpowder that's ever going, and it's just with the assumption and the hope that you will not be cheesy with this, basically. And I have that talk and being very blunt with my players, like, hey, like this is meant to kind of hand wave the need to make bullets to save you time so your character can RP and do other things, instead of having to be like every downtime being like, well, I gotta go get saltpeter and gunpowder and lead and whatever so I can make this to be a thing. Dropping prone and stuff like that, I generally allow as a free action because my players don't abuse it. If they were abusing it, I could see it potentially being an issue where they're like, as I don't want to get shot, so like I drop as a free action and lie prone for my turn and then jump back up, kind of thing, when it's my turn to fire back or whatever. If they're abusing it, I would have a conversation, be like, hey, if this is going to continue, we'll need to make sure we modify the rules as necessary. I also allow my players to swap between weapons with ease. So, if they're starting off with like, they swing with an axe and they're like, I want to pull a gun and shoot a gun off at somebody, I'll be like, yeah, cool. Swing your axe as part of your attack action. You'll like stow that with one hand and pull a gun up and fire it or something like that. I allow them to kind of feel badass swapping between multiple weapons, so they can feel more badass and they can do a little bit more, and they're not necessarily like stuck being like, well, I swung once and now I can't do anything, so I guess I'll cry or whatever. Getting rid of the tedious stuff is kind of cool. Hopefully they talk through like everything that would be allowed, but let's continue and see what happens. Ranger goes and fires their arrow. Hit. Cool beans. Homebrew class does something. Rogue goes with hand crossbow, shoot, sneak attack. Genasi Paladin goes and uses a racial class cast of burning hands, flavors it as coming out of their sword. It's a pretty cool moment. Cleric, which is me, goes, I'm playing a sword and board, casts a guiding bolt, told by DM that I need a free hand, but shield, symbol on my shield is fine for a focus. Cleric, no worries, I want to drop the sword for a free action, cast the spell, and then pick it up as an object interaction. DM, all right, you do that. Now's the bandit's turn. Melee for 2 combat cycles, Paladin gets crit, dash to him for the turn, and the bandit near me holds their action, and back to my turn. I go to drop and cast Cure Wounds. Bandit's held action is to grab my sword, so after the spell, I decide to walk away from the bandit. Bandit gets an attack of opportunity. Ask the DM if held actions don't use a reaction in his games. I go to drop and cast Cure Wounds. The bandit's held action is to then grab my sword, so after the spell, I decide to walk away from the bandit. Bandit gets an attack of opportunity. I ask the DM if held actions don't use a reaction in his games. The DM is visibly irritated. The DM corrects himself that he shouldn't get the attack. I step away and go for the sword on a dead bandit's body, a little ways away. The game ends shortly afterwards. The DM pulls me aside and says I'm not invited back because my playstyle is too cheesy and he doesn't want the new players to see it. Though I thought I matched the vibes, now I feel like I fucked up. Friends say I'm not, but they aren't objective, so am I the asshole? So couple things this could be. One, the DM thinks OP is in fact being cheesy, dropping a sword as a free action and cast a spell and then pick it back up. If so, the DM should just say, hey, when it comes to weapons, picking up, putting them down will be an action or bonus action or whatever they want to count it as. Just clarify, because the rules at any time can shift in D&D or in any tabletop role-playing game based on how everyone is reacting to them and how they want to make the game feel overall. So this can be cleaned up really quickly there, as long as you just are politely clarifying it. 2, the DM does not like being corrected on rules, and OP did clarify them to them that holding your action does require your reaction, which it does. As a DM, if a player clarifies a rule to me, I thank them personally. We're all human and we're going to forget things. So as long as the player isn't being an asshole about the clarification, I feel like the DM here is being a bit unreasonable. Assuming the DM has been playing since 3.5, there's a chance that they might be a smidge older than OP here, and therefore maybe they don't like the idea of a younger player correcting them. Third option here is the DM really wants to get a hit on OP and was mad they didn't, either because they're a bit competitive, which could be the case as they see OP as being, quote, cheesy and want to get back at them for it, or because they really want there to be some sort of sense of danger here, and maybe they're not happy that OP's character seems to maybe not be in that kind of danger. Don't think it's the latter part of this potential reason, if we're going to be honest. If I was OP, I wouldn't worry too much. Just find a new table. Don't be afraid to have a conversation, though, everybody, with your DM or other players when you're playing. If you're trying to potentially stretch the rules here, just say, hey, I know this might be coming off as cheesy. If you think it is, we can always do X instead. Show that you're willing to compromise and that your intention isn't to be like a cheesy piece of shit. Just like, hey, I want to try to do something cool here. Part of your DM will likely then be more open to doing things as you're kind of coming off as you're not trying to stretch the rules and trying to like game the system. You're trying to do something cool and you want to have a conversation with them about that. Jumping on to our next story. Our next story is going to be from user Unlikely Gas 2903, titled DM, pardon me here, rapes my character. So a trigger warning ahead of time here. You could not tell by the title, there's going to be some sexual assault mentioned here within this. So if it's not your thing, I apologize. You might want to skip ahead to our third story potentially, or this may not be the video for you. So I apologize if it's not your thing. So a few years ago, I was in this D&D party with a bunch of guys and I was the only girl. I was 19 at the time. I think he was like 29 or something. Now the DM was super weird to me the entire time, and anytime he was around me, he would pet me, hug me, poke me, touch my thighs, grab me, sniff my hair, and other weird shit like that. He would also constantly tell rape and molestation jokes. Okay. If your DM or another player out of game are making you uncomfortable, you need to state your discomfort. They may not be realizing that they're being weird. If it's something less creepy than literally what OP's mentioning here, I think the DM's aware of what they're doing here, though. If you have mentioned you don't like to be pet, hug, poke, touch, etc., and they still continue, or like in this instance, with multiple instances, the DM getting very, I'm going to call it handsy without any positive reaction from you, you need to just leave the table. Run far away. The rape and molestation jokes are really uncool. Just to be kind of blunt, like, yeah, there are tables where dark humor is okay, but make sure you really know your table before you start cracking jokes like this. New people at your table could have dealt with something that you're making a joke about, and they may not enjoy these topics being joked about. A good table is one where everyone feels comfortable to be themselves in a way that isn't hurting others. Your jokes, if you're utilizing dark humor like that, may be what makes that new party member and even potential friendship here leave the table because you're cracking what they deem to be insensitive jokes. There are several things he did throughout the playthrough. First thing that should have put me off was that he made me roll for my breast and ass size. Okay, just starting off here, even before rolling for this, somebody getting handsy with you in a very inappropriate fashion should be your first red flag, really. But I'm going to continue here. Secondly, he made a bunch of rapist bandits attack only my character. I'm assuming the character here is female. And he made them threaten me the entire time. Third, he made me sleep with an NPC because they made me a really powerful potion for no money just to force my character into sleeping with them. That is fucking gross. And then probably the craziest one was that he made a scene where my character was raped by a very powerful NPC. Again, this is fucking disgusting. There weren't that many details, thank God, but it was finally disturbing enough to make me leave and never return. Ugh. Fucking skeeved. Okay. I would be very hesitant if I joined a new table and the first thing the DM made me do was roll for my ass size, my bulge size, etc. I personally don't want to play anything that is even remotely like the Fatal system. And I feel like most people probably aren't going to want to do that either. For those who are unaware, the Fatal system was a fantasy RPG system that came out in the early 2000s. It was well known for its graphic and sexual violence. Basically, when you're creating a character, you could roll for various things like bulge size, breast size, ability to... a lot of very graphic sizing for your parts. Your character, also during your adventures in this system, was likely to be sexually assaulted or end up participating or doing things which they may not have wanted. Not to say they were playing the system here in this instance. This probably was a 5e system, but it sounds very similar to it. I would also be hesitant to play in a game where my character was going to be sexually assaulted. If you and your table want to have that as a topic or something that could happen, that's great for you and your table. But a topic like this and many others need to be discussed as possible things that can happen either in session 0, or if you're joining mid-campaign, the DM needs to sit down and talk it out with that new player. Be very blunt, just being like, hey, we run a very dark table here. There is potential that X, Y, and Z things could happen. If you are not comfortable with those things happening, please let me know. This will not be the table for you. Just be blunt, put it right out there for everyone. Do not bring up something like this ever. Good Lord. Because spraining or forcing a PC to participate in things that they may not want to is very disgusting and wrong, just to be honest. I would have either been out at the rolling for breast size, or if I had for some reason gotten past that, which I don't think I would have. When we got to a point where a group of bandits were trying to rape my only PC, I would personally not want to sit through that, because that's clearly at this point, I feel like it's the DM's vaguely disguised fetish, if I'm being honest. I'm sorry, OP had to go through multiple instances here. For a second here, let's not focus on all the sexual nastiness going on. One would think, anybody at the table here would be like, hey, OP here seems to not be enjoying themselves when either I, the DM, enforcing their PC to do things they don't like. Maybe I should talk to them about that. As a DM or party member, you would think you'd want everyone at the table to be having a good time. So if someone's clearly having multiple instances of not having a good time and issues, you'd want to talk to them about it. Even if we're not talking about the context here of sexual assault, forcing your character to sleep with NPCs they don't want to. If you're watching somebody play the game and they're having multiple instances of them not having fun, be it like they're going into fights and their PC keeps going down and they're very disturbed, perturbed, annoyed with it, or they're just not RPing well or something like that, you as at least the DM would want to go, hey, I noticed you seem to be having some issues here. You're not having fun. What's going on, bud? What's going on? What can we do to kind of correct this and get you back on track? Because there's a chance that maybe they're just not enjoying, their class. They're not enjoying their character. Maybe they're having issues getting that character, involved with the story or something like that. And you want to find that out so that way they're not like, well, fuck this, I'm out. Because then you might be losing out on that potential player who could be having fun and helping out a ton if we just did that course correction. This is obviously, we're looking at this outside of the lens of a DM forcing their vaguely disguised fetish on a player here. Kind of bringing it back into the context of the situation, though, I kind of have to wonder, what the fuck do the other players think of this? Surely they all aren't enjoying this weird rape fantasy as well, right? Let's push the story onward and see if that gets answered. By the way, during all of this, none of the other party members said anything or called him out for any of these things. Although one of them did reach out to me after I left and told me they all thought the way he was treating me was super creepy. So at least that helped me feel less insane about everything, because the whole time I was just making excuses because I had never played D&D before, and I'm also autistic, so I didn't really grasp how bad the situation was at the time. But now I know that the DM was super inappropriate and way out of line. But for anyone victim blames me or something, I was not in a situation where I could just leave and cut all of them out of my life immediately, so I had to play nice until I could leave. I don't want to be found through my story, so I won't say what the situation was, but it was hyper specific. All you need to know, is that I was basically trapped. Anyways, thanks for reading. If a DM makes you feel weird or gross or creeped out, don't question yourself. Just get out if you can. If it feels icky, it probably is. Trust your instincts. Those are actually really, really good words. Always trust your gut when it comes to stuff. I really hope the DM wasn't somebody that OP was living with and was forced to play D&D with them because of that. I will also say shame on the other party members for not speaking out. If you are at a table and you see an issue like this, especially a big one like this, call it out. I know it can be tough. Confrontation sucks, but it is the right thing to do. And if that DM, player, etc. will treat somebody else like shit, they will also potentially treat you like shit. I'm glad OP is out of this situation, and I really, really hope that this horrible experience did not taint their want to play any sort of like tabletop in the future. I'm glad they're out of that now, though. If you are not aware, I do stream on Twitch during the weekdays at night, usually starting around 7 p.m. Central Time in the US. Please come check me out. Links are down in the description below. I would love to get to hang out with you guys, so please do feel free to do that, but let's jump into our last story here. So, our last story for the day is from user Admiral Snafu. I like the name, titled Quickest I've Ever Seen a Player Booted from a Game. Warning, mentions of sexual assault. This is going to be a lot lighter than our last story, I will tell you that. Our group recently allowed a newcomer to join our currently level 8 campaign. We'll call him Doug. He wanted to roll a wizard even though we already had one, so he asked to roll an abjuration wizard. Nothing really horrible here. I personally don't care. People stack up in classes, but every table's different. Immediately during in-game introduction, he acts condescendingly towards the cleric and myself, Divine Soul Sorcerer, but says that it's a character quirk. He considers arcane magic better than divine. Okay, fine. Then we get into combat. Our berserker gets 2 unlucky crits on himself, and so the cleric naturally decides to heal him. Doug. I cast Counterspell and say, we don't need some Sky Daddy's interference. The DM calls a halt to the game to ask what the fuck Doug is doing. Doug, as it turns out, is so virulently, Jesus Christ, virulently atheist and anti any sort of religion, even in fiction, that he can't tolerate any positive portrayal of a god. Okay, not even counting this dude's distaste for positive portrayals of deities, you're fucking counterspelling another player's spell that isn't harming anybody. The DM needs to shut this down really quickly here because that shit should not be allowed. Cleric. Dude, it's just a game. Doug flies off the handle, screaming, spittle flying and red-faced at the cleric about how he's enabling religious zealots. It insinuates that cleric's player sexually assaults little kids. Cleric stands up and is obviously ready to start throwing punches. It's a bit intense. I would probably tell this person to fuck off, but I digress. DM is having none of this nonsense and tells Doug he's out. He tried to flip the table, I assume Doug here, on the way out, failing due to 2 other players holding it down, and slammed the door behind him as he stormed out. To quote the rogue's player, did that actually just happen? Cards on the table. As a kid, I had some negative religious experiences. Everything not Christian is demonic, paddling as the first resort, the accuser of a minor is always right, etc. However, I don't let that taint my view of people who either believe there's something more to the world or want to play as a healer whose God actually lets them heal the sick and wounded. Namely because my characters have a bad habit of going, what does this button do? And then requiring magic healing or resurrection, but I digress. If for some reason you really dislike deities or positive portrayals of deities or religion, and it's something you don't want to have come up at your table, you need to bring that up in session 0 or when you're meeting with your DM, because I'm gonna be honest, like 90% of the TTRPG systems that are fantasy based out there generally have gods, deities, something like that of some form, so they're likely to show up and is likely to occur. If they're an issue, you need to only play systems that have no gods or make sure your table doesn't have that. Don't be surprised when a fantasy system has gods, and also don't be surprised when those gods are also interacting with the world, either through clerics or whatever. Fantasy is fantasy for a reason. In this instance, I'm very glad the trash took itself out. With that, I want to thank everybody for hanging out. That's going to be it for today. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment down below. I love to see and hear your guys' comments and get to read those. Also, don't forget to catch me on Twitch, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, everybody.